The service gate slammed down, bent my rifle against the floor, and sealed me inside a tunnel full of sprinting infected. Beyond the armored observation glass, my fiancée removed her hand from the control panel. Livia Crane held my command key. Damien Kest stood beside her with one arm around her waist. I tore the rifle free. The barrel came out crooked. Opened the gate. Livia met my eyes and shook her head. The first infected reached me. I caught its throat turned with its momentum and smashed its face into the steel barrier. A second body lunged over it. I kicked its knee sideways and shoved it beneath the descending emergency brace. Metal crushed its spine. More infected climbed across the twitching body. "Livia, you said children were trapped down here." My voice carried through the speaker beside the glass. There were no children. Her answer landed harder than the gate. 12 minutes earlier, she had called from the Western Control Station. 5 children had entered the maintenance tunnel, she claimed. A support door had failed behind them. I had left the command center before my guards assembled. She knew I would. Damien leaned toward the speaker. "Your settlement needed a leader who understood power." Gunfire rattled through the ceiling. 3 controlled bursts. A pause. 2 more. Those were rifles from my armory. Damien's people were already inside. I drew my sidearm and fired. The first bullet entered an infected eye. The second passed through an open mouth. The third struck a shoulder when another body collided with me. I drove my elbow backward and felt teeth snap beside my ear. 612 people live behind that wall. "They trusted you," Livia answered. That was the problem. I fired twice more. 2 infected dropped. 7 more filled their place. Damien's faction had surrounded my settlement for almost a year. He possessed trained gunmen, stolen fuel, and enough ammunition to erase weaker camps. He lacked clean wells, productive fields, and people capable of maintaining the systems he intended to steal. I had rejected every demand to surrender command. Damien had found another entrance, the woman carrying my unrestricted access key. I had given it to her myself. My pistol locked open, empty. I dropped the magazine and reached for another. My ammunition pouch was gone. An infected had torn it away with part of my belt. I drew the hatchet from my thigh. The first swing split a temple. The second lodged beneath a cheekbone. I twisted the blade free and drove my shoulder through the next body. 2 infected fell together. A third seized my coat. I broke its wrist against the wall and buried the hatchet above its ear. 5 years of combat had carved every wasted movement out of me. The tunnel was simply too narrow. There were too many. Livia stepped closer to the glass. "You kept spending our supplies on strangers." I tore the hatchet free. "Those strangers grew our food. You let them question you. They earned that right. You chose them over me." Dark blood struck the glass between us. "I chose 600 lives over your private pantry." Her mouth tightened. I had seen that expression when the council rejected her demand for personal guards. It returned when I converted the room she wanted into an infant clinic. I had called it frustration. It had been resentment. Damien tapped my command key against the glass. "You built an excellent fortress, Silas." My hatchet struck another skull and snapped at the handle. The metal head vanished beneath moving feet. I kept the broken shaft. "You won't hold it through winter." His smile weakened. The eastern well required pressure balancing every 3rd day. The southern greenhouse relied on a bypass only 3 people understood. Heavy rain flooded the grain vault unless 2 drainage gates were closed in the proper order. Damien knew how to seize buildings. He did not know how to keep 600 people alive inside them. Livia knew that. She had chosen him anyway. An infected tackled me against the gate. Its teeth closed beside my cheek. I forced the broken handle through its eye. 2 more seized my shoulders. Another bit through my left sleeve. Pain tore from my forearm to my jaw. I drove my head backward and crushed a nose behind me. The body remained attached. I looked through the glass. Livia had begun walking toward the stairwell. Was any of it real? She stopped. For 5 years, I had protected her through the end of civilization. I crossed an infected hospital for her asthma medicine. I gave her my winter ration after a bullet passed through my side. I slept outside her room during the fever outbreak that killed 38 people. I built our quarters after the third wall survived its first horde. She touched the engagement ring hanging from a chain around her neck. I loved who you were before other lives depended on me, before survival forced me to stop placing her wishes above everyone else's needs, before Damien promised comfort without responsibility. The answer hurt less than it should have. The dead had already stripped most softness from me. Livia had found what remained. Damien guided her toward the stairs. Neither looked back. The infected dragged me down. My cheek struck wet concrete. One knee remained beneath me. I forced myself upright long enough to break a jaw with my fist. Another body hit from the side. My shoulder slammed against the floor. Teeth punched through my upper arm. Hands clawed at my throat. I reached toward the controls beside the gate. The panel remained dark. I had designed that security system 3 years earlier. I had programmed Livia's access myself. Equal authority, no restrictions, no second approval, trust expressed through engineering, the worst structure I had ever built. Something broke inside my elbow. My hand stopped answering me. I let it fall. The tunnel ceiling blurred above the moving bodies. A low mechanical tone entered my hearing. Pale blue letters appeared across my failing vision. Builder qualification confirmed. The infected continued tearing into me. Core function: construct, repair, and upgrade settlements within claimed territory. Blood covered one eye. Primary failure: unrestricted authority transfer. Temporal reconstruction available. Return point: 729 days before index outbreak. Memories and peak physical condition will be preserved. Except, I could no longer speak. My right hand had disappeared beneath the dead. I answered with the only thing still under my control: intent. Accept. The tunnel vanished. I woke with my fingers locked around Livia's wrist. She gasped beside me. Silas? My other hand had already searched beneath the pillow. Only cool cotton and a charging cable waited there. I released her before the bones shifted beneath my grip. Livia pulled her arm against her chest. The bedroom smelled of citrus soap instead of blood. Rain tapped against the apartment windows. Electric lights glowed beneath the kitchen cabinets. Far below, a delivery truck crossed the intersection. Its engine sounded louder than the horde. I sat upright. Livia looked 7 years younger. Her chestnut hair reached below her shoulders. The scar near her chin had not happened yet. She wore one of my gray shirts and the engagement ring on her left hand. I checked my arms. The bites, burns, and knife scars were gone. The finger broken during the northern siege was straight. Construction work and years in boxing gyms had already made me broad at 22. The system restored my best condition without reshaping me into a stranger. Every muscle answered with the speed and control I had possessed at 29. A pale interface opened before me. Temporal reconstruction complete. Biological age 22. Outbreak countdown 729 days, 18 hours, 41 minutes. I watched the seconds fall. This was real. Livia rubbed her wrist. You hurt me. I released you. You grabbed me in your sleep. Her voice carried concern, but her eyes measured my reaction. I had once mistaken that attention for affection. Now I recognized calculation. What date is it? She frowned. October 8th. The year. Silas, what happened? The year, she answered. The system had returned me just under 2 years before the first mass infection wave. 7 years before the gate, I stood. My feet found the floor without hesitation. The scars were gone. Everything they had taught me remained. Livia reached for my shoulder. I stepped outside her hand. Her concern sharpened. Did you have another nightmare about your father? My father had been dead for 11 months. His construction company now belonged mostly to me. Livia had entered the company through our relationship. Damien had entered through her. I crossed the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. "What are you doing?" she asked. A dark travel case stood beneath two hanging coats. During our first winter after the outbreak, that case had split beside a campfire. A black phone fell from its lining. Its battery had been dead by then, and I never recovered the data. The hiding place remained. I set the case on the floor and opened the false seam with my utility knife. A black burner phone dropped into my palm. Silence settled behind me. I turned. Livia stared at the device. Her face answered my first question. "You went through my things." I pressed the power button. The phone still held 73% charge. A 4-digit lock screen appeared. Damien had reused those digits on the settlement armory terminal in the first timeline, the founding date of his private security company. I entered them. The phone unlocked. Livia moved toward me. My left hand caught her wrist before her fingers reached the screen. I applied almost no pressure. She pulled once and understood that strength would not solve her problem. "What is on this phone?" I asked. "Give it back." Wrong answer. "It belongs to me." The device might. The contents involve my company. I released her and stepped beyond reach. The message history contained weeks of hotel arrangements and coded payments. Damien's name appeared only as the letter D. One recent message did not bother with subtlety. "Keep each invoice beneath the second signature limit." Livia had answered 3 minutes later. "Silas never checks purchasing before quarter close." I opened the attachments. 17 invoices carried the name Crown Line Site Services. Equipment rental, safety inspections, and emergency transport filled the descriptions. Every amount remained below $25,000. None of the listed machines had ever left my yards. The total reached $184,600. A hotel photograph showed Livia seated beside Damien. It proved the affair. The invoices justified freezing access. They did not reveal how far Damien's network extended. I sent encrypted copies to my outside counsel and forensic accountant. Livia watched the upload complete. "I can explain." "I know. You don't understand what Damien was arranging. He arranged to steal from me while sleeping with you." Her mouth closed. I opened my primary phone. Venn Civil Systems had 6 yards, 83 employees, and 11 active contracts. My father had left me 61% of the voting shares through direct ownership and a family trust. That authority still existed. I disabled Livia's purchasing credentials. Every active session connected to her account ended. Pending Crown Line transfers froze when I flagged the vendor for fraud review. Livia's phone vibrated in her hand. "You can't do this without the board." "I just did. Your father never ran the company this way. My father trusted you." The words landed. Her eyes filled. Her breathing remained steady and her shoulders did not move. The tears were meant for me. They changed nothing. "I was trying to protect us," she said. "You transferred company money to Damien. He has political connections your father never had. Then he can use them to fund his own company. You've been drowning since your father died." She stepped closer and softened her voice. "I was carrying things you couldn't." The younger version of me would have listened. He would have questioned his memory and apologized before discovering what she wanted from him. That man had died beneath a tunnel full of infected. I called outside counsel. The lawyer answered on the third ring. I gave her the facts, authorized evidence preservation, and instructed her to contact the bank's fraud unit. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. Livia's personal phone began ringing. Damien's name filled the screen. She looked at me before answering. That glance confirmed the rest. "Damien," she whispered. His voice rose through the speaker. "Why is the Crown Line transfer frozen?" Livia ended the call. My phone had captured the exchange. Counsel could decide whether the recording was legally usable. I only needed the lead. Damien had connected himself to the vendor without knowing an investigation existed. I forwarded the file to counsel. Livia folded her arms. "You planned this. I found the phone 20 minutes ago. No one changes this much in 20 minutes." She was right. It had taken 7 years. I opened the apartment access system. Livia had never signed a lease. The building registered her as a revocable guest under my personal holding company. I removed her access to the office document room company network and garage. Residential access would remain active until security supervised her departure. You're throwing me out? Yes. I live here. You maintain another apartment through Crown Line. Her eyes shifted. The burner phone contained that address. I called building security and requested 2 witnesses. Livia's tears disappeared before the call ended. Anger settled across her face. You're humiliating me over some invoices. I'm removing someone who stole from me. You'll regret this. I already regretted trusting you. The security supervisor arrived with the property manager. Livia packed 1 suitcase beneath their observation. She left most of her clothing and jewelry behind. Counsel would arrange collection later. At the door, she removed the engagement ring. She placed it on the kitchen counter. Damien will destroy you. I looked at the small gold circle. He can try through his lawyer. You think paperwork will protect you? Today it is cheaper than ammunition. Her expression changed. For 1 second, she looked at me as though a stranger wore my face. The door closed behind her. The property manager confirmed her departure. I revoked her remaining access. The apartment became quiet. The system opened above the abandoned ring. Citadel Architect system initialization available. I accepted. 7 functions appeared. Survey, claim, blueprint, construct, repair, upgrade, permissions. A single explanation followed. Within claimed territory, real materials and connected power may be used to build or upgrade settlement infrastructure. The next display defined my first limit. Daily construction capacity 8,000 kg of system fabrication load. I opened the explanation. The quota applied to material requiring supernatural cutting, shaping, curing, precision placement, or integration. Bulk earth, loose aggregate, pumped water, and conventionally moved material remained limited by equipment, volume, storage, labor, and power. A truckload of soil did not consume the same capacity as a precision generator. It still required a truck. I selected blueprint. Basic fencing gates, utility shelters, water foundations, solar mounts, drainage barns, greenhouses, and storage buildings appeared first. Hospitals, machine workshops, layered walls, underground reservoirs, and integrated defenses remained locked behind practical requirements. The advanced structures demanded stable power, clean water specialists, materials, and enough residents to operate them. I selected a reinforced utility shelter. Requires claimed domain, approved materials, and 126 kWh powers. I tried to approve it, no active domain. The system required territory I legally owned or physically controlled. My phone showed 5:38 in the morning. 5 company yards involved board ownership. Yard 3 belonged entirely to a holding company in my name. I dressed in reinforced work trousers, boots, and a dark field jacket. A licensed pistol rested inside my office cabinet. I loaded it and secured it beneath the jacket. The first infected would not appear for almost 2 years, but Damien already had armed employees and a reason to use them. My pickup waited in the underground garage. Its ordinary glass standard tires and unarmored doors looked fragile after 5 years of barricades. I started the engine. Traffic moved beneath working lights. A bakery opened its shutters. A garbage truck lifted a metal container. Workers waited beneath bus shelters while rain darkened the road. Every pharmacy, factory, warehouse, farm, pump, and rail line still functioned. Civilization was producing everything I would need. It simply did not know the deadline. Yard 3 occupied 6 hectares inside the Eastern Industrial District. Steel racks filled the rear lot. Concrete drainage sections stood beside 2 fabrication buildings. Heavy machines remained parked beneath long shelters. The night guard opened the gate when he recognized my truck. I told him I was conducting a confidential materials test and entered the rear building alone. Pallets of cement mix lined one wall. Rebar structural tubing, copper cable insulation, ventilation parts, and electrical panels filled marked storage zones. A battery container connected to the building grid waited near the service doors. I placed my palm against the floor. Claim. Blue lines spread beneath my hand. They crossed the building, passed through the yard, and stopped at the legal boundary. Ownership verified. Claim Yard 3 as initial domain? Yes. A low vibration passed through the floor. The overhead lights dimmed for 1 second. Domain established. All claimed domains share one daily capacity pool. The system registered 84 tons of structural material and enough stored power for the test. Every object changed when I focused on it. Steel displayed grade and weight. Cement revealed moisture exposure. Machines showed worn seals and overdue maintenance. 3 fence posts glowed amber where corrosion had spread below the soil. A roof leak appeared before water reached the office ceiling. The system exposed failures before they became emergencies. I selected the reinforced utility shelter. A translucent 6 by 4 meter structure appeared inside an unused test area. The steel frame composite panel's ventilation root-hardened door and electrical panel highlighted separately. System fabrication load 4,380 kg. Bulk and precast mass 11,600 kg. I used a forklift to move everything into the marked zone. The machine responded beneath my hands with familiar precision. A loose lifting hook swung toward the cab. I caught it before it struck the glass. My strength, timing, and spatial awareness had returned intact. I parked the final pallet. Estimated time 16 minutes. I stepped outside the boundary. Construct. Steel tubing lifted from the racks. Each section cut, drilled, and locked into a measured frame. Precast panels slid into place while insulation sealed the joints. Electrical conduit settled behind the inner walls. Ventilation ducting joined above the ceiling. The hardened door seated into its frame. 16 minutes after I issued the command, the blue grid faded. A complete shelter stood where the floor had been empty. I opened the door. The hinges moved without resistance. The electrical panel displayed stable power. Fresh sealant scented the air. Construction complete. Capacity remaining 361 UG. I retrieved a sledgehammer. The first strike landed beside the doorframe. Impact traveled through my shoulders. A shallow mark appeared across the composite surface. The wall did not split. I struck again. The damage remained cosmetic. 30 workers had spent 6 weeks building our first reinforced shelter after the outbreak. 4 died during supply runs. 2 more died when a storm collapsed the unfinished roof. The system had produced something stronger before breakfast. I selected Upgrade. The next grade required fire-resistant lining, independent ventilation, waterproofing, sealed cable access, and verification by a qualified electrical technician. The correct parts were only half the requirement. Someone still had to certify that the finished room would not poison or burn its occupants. I opened Settlement Progression. Domain Foundation Water Renewable Power Secure Shelter Sanitation. Reward 2,000 kg daily capacity after the next midnight reset. Homestead tier waited beyond that milestone. It required 5 voluntary permanent residents, secure housing, food production, a 30-day reserve, and basic medical capacity. I focused on the word voluntary. Captives do not count? Correct. Temporary contractors do not qualify. A prison consumed guards food and ammunition merely to keep its workers inside. I needed people who chose to stay and possessed the authority to warn me when I was wrong. That would be harder than buying steel. Yard 3 could become a supply base. It could not support farms, reservoirs, livestock housing, and layered defenses. I entered my father's old office. No one had moved his things since his death. A yellow hard hat rested on the top shelf. A cracked mug held 6 sharpened pencils. Property maps filled the lower drawers of his drafting table. My father had spent his final year examining remote sites for an off-grid construction campus. The board rejected every location as too distant, expensive, or difficult to ensure. Those weaknesses became advantages after civilization failed. One folder carried a handwritten label, Briar Basin Agricultural Reserve. I spread the map across the desk. The property covered 4,760 acres beyond the northern ridges. A disused limestone quarry occupied its center. An abandoned research campus overlooked the eastern fields. 6 storage buildings stood beside a damaged freight spur. The basin also contained pasture forest 3 reservoirs and more than 600 acres of workable soil. Only one paved road entered from the north. 2 rough service routes crossed the western and southern ridges. A geological survey suggested a deep aquifer beneath the eastern slope. I knew the property. During the second winter of the apocalypse, I led a salvage team into Briar Basin. We recovered enough seed to save our next planting season. We also found 73 bodies inside the administration building. The owner had invited relatives, employees, and friends there after the outbreak. They possessed generators, food, farmland, and tools. One guest concealed a bite. The entrance doors did not lock properly. 73 people died because supplies arrived before quarantine and command rules. I studied the contours. The quarry throat could become an inner gate. The raised campus could hold housing and medical facilities. The eastern fields could produce grain, potatoes, beans, and animal feed. The western forest required fire breaks. The freight spur could deliver bulk material while the rail network still operated. The property registry showed an asking price of $3,800,000. My inheritance account already held just over $5 million in liquid cash. Buying the land would leave enough to begin construction without touching payroll. Selling the penthouse, 2 luxury vehicles, and a vacant urban parcel would replenish the development fund. Venn Civil Systems would remain intact. Its people, yards, contracts, warehouses, and heavy equipment were more valuable than another number in my account. I called the listing broker. He answered after 7 rings. "This is early. My name is Silas Venn. I'm calling about Briar Basin." His voice sharpened. "The agricultural reserve? I want to inspect it today. The owner requires proof of funds before private access. You'll have it in 5 minutes. The property is almost 2 hours away. Then leave now." He paused. "When were you hoping to meet?" 90 minutes ago." He laughed once. I remained silent. 10:30, he said. "North Gate. Send the title package, mineral rights, water rights, rail agreement, environmental reports, and access easements before I arrive. That is a considerable file. You've had 3 years to organize it." The documents arrived 22 minutes later. I forwarded them to council and requested a same-day preliminary review. The system could raise walls quickly. It could not resolve disputed water rights after the government collapsed. I needed every road, tunnel, rail section, and underground resource inside the property boundary. The broker waited beside a rusted agricultural gate. His polished shoes had already collected mud. A tablet rested beneath one arm. He looked from my pickup to my work clothes. I expected a corporate team. "I know what I'm looking for." He unlocked the gate. A cracked road descended between overgrown fields. The basin opened beyond the first hill. Even my memories had reduced its scale. The abandoned research campus occupied a raised plateau. Long storage buildings stood behind it. Broken greenhouse frames caught the gray light. The quarry opened along the northern ridge like a stone bowl cut from the mountain. 3 reservoirs reflected the cloudy sky. The freight line curved beside the western fields. Everything looked empty. I remembered 73 bodies behind those windows. This time the land would hold a living city. The broker spoke while I drove. The research program had tested drought-resistant crops before public funding disappeared. The quarry operator withdrew after transport costs erased its profit. A development group purchased the property and failed to secure grid expansion. The current owner wanted a clean exit. We stopped beside the administration building. One corner of the roof sagged. Weeds split the parking surface. Several windows were boarded. I placed my hand against the outer wall. Survey. A pale grid spread through the structure. Foundation acceptable. Roof failure localized. The broker watched my hand, finding something? More than the previous inspectors. I walked around the campus. Underground pipes appeared as faded lines. Collapsed drainage sections glowed red. The old electrical network showed 7 major failures. One reservoir carried agricultural contamination. Another contained heavy sediment. The third could support irrigation after treatment. We drove into the quarry. Loose stone covered the descending road. The deepest floor had flooded into a dark pool. 3 tunnels entered the northern wall. One had partially collapsed. Another contained standing water. The third remained stable for 87 meters before reaching an unverified chamber. A horde would struggle to descend the quarry face. Heavy rain could turn the lower level into a trap. The system expanded the survey. Aquifer depth 96, 114 meters. Initial arable land 638 acres. Major risks: tunnel failure, wildfire, contaminated surface water, winter power loss. The land offered useful advantages, but each one required work before it became protection. I climbed the eastern ridge alone. Wind pressed my jacket against my body. From the top, the basin became a construction plan. The main road entered too close to the campus. The reservoirs lay beyond any affordable first wall. The western forest reached the storage district. The quarry throat offered the strongest inner entrance. Water had to come before population. Power had to exist before workshops. Drainage belonged beneath walls, not behind them. Food production needed to lead mass recruitment. Quarantine belonged outside the residential ring. Livestock belonged downwind of housing. Solar arrays could occupy the ridge while fuel remained underground. The administration building could become a hospital after its roof and utilities were rebuilt. Translucent lines spread across the landscape. An inner compound wrapped around the quarry throat. Housing covered the campus plateau. Agricultural barriers protected the eastern fields. Utility tunnels linked water, power, sewage, and communications. The preview lasted 3 seconds. Then the system displayed the scale. Processed structural mass for initial city shell 4,000 tons. At current capacity, 63 years. I had 729 days. I needed to expand construction capacity before attempting the city. The broker reached the ridge several minutes later. He bent over with his hands on his knees. Worth the climb? Yes. You want time to review everything? No. He straightened. The owner is firm at $3.8 million. I'll offer $3.4 in cash. That is below their minimum. I assume environmental liability. The sale includes water rights, mineral rights, rail access service, road control, every fixed structure, and all abandoned equipment. They may counter. They have 48 hours. You came here because you want it. Wanting it does not repair the rail bridge. His expression changed. He had expected enthusiasm to weaken my position. 5 years of negotiating food, medicine, fuel, and prisoner exchanges had removed that weakness. I'll present the offer, he said. You'll recommend it. That costs another 100,000. No. It saves your client 6 months. He looked over the abandoned property. I'll call them. The owner accepted before I reached the main gate. They requested a 4-day cash closing. A previous buyer had completed most title work before financing collapsed. My lawyers needed only to verify the remaining rights and environmental disclosures. I paid the deposit from the passenger seat. The next 4 days moved quickly. I listed the penthouse and 2 luxury vehicles below market value for immediate sale. The vacant urban parcel went to a developer who had tried to buy it from my father twice. Before moving company property, my holding company signed a market-rate development contract with Venn Civil Systems. Council circulated it to the board and minority shareholders. Every shipment machine, hour, material, pallet, and employee shift would be invoiced. The company would earn a profit without endangering payroll. I would not condemn Livia for stealing company assets and then treat them as my personal warehouse. My operations director received orders to inventory every truck, generator, pump, excavator, fuel tank, spare tire, welding machine, and employee certification. He called within 20 minutes. Are we preparing for a war? We're preparing for long supply interruptions. How long? Long enough to expose every weakness. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need today. I added a second instruction. Every employee could voluntarily submit household-size medical dependencies and emergency contacts. I would eventually recruit households. Separating skilled workers from the people they loved produced obedience only until the first open gate. Most first-wave supplies came from existing Venn civil inventory under the new contract. My holding company purchased stored steel precast sections, cable pumps, and fuel tanks at documented market prices. Generators, loaders, cranes, and mixer equipment were leased by the hour. I bought the specialized well-assembly battery modules, treatment components, and solar inverters from outside suppliers at rush prices. The quantities still attracted attention. The explanation remained simple. Venn Civil Systems was developing a private off-grid agricultural and disaster recovery campus. That description was completely true. The reason stayed private. The seller granted sealed staging access to an abandoned freight yard 12 kilometers south of Briar Basin. 22 loaded trucks waited there on the final night. None would enter the property before title transfer became official. Damien sent messages through 3 different numbers. The first threatened a lawsuit. The second offered to settle. The third promised I would lose the company before the month ended. I preserved each one and forwarded them to counsel. The bank froze the remaining Crown Line funds connected to my company. 2 of Damien's political contacts called me. Both received my lawyer's number. He wanted anger. I gave him delays, frozen money, and people who documented every threat. Each night I trained inside a private boxing gym after it closed. Heavy bags rocked beneath my hands. A weighted vest turned the stairwell into a test of endurance. My body needed maintenance rather than rebuilding. The old world had comfortable ways to provide it. At 2:07 on the 4th morning, the electronic registry posted the completed transfer. Every requested right now belonged to my holding company. I called the freight yard supervisor. Release the convoy. The first trucks entered Briar Basin before dawn. Well equipment went east. Solar components climbed toward the ridge. Concrete precast sections and steel remained beside the quarry throat. Fuel entered a locked, double-walled temporary tank compound near the freight spur. 2 trailer-mounted 600-kilowatt diesel generators stopped beside a charged industrial battery container. They would power the first builds until renewable generation came online. The last driver left as morning light touched the campus roofs. I stood in the center of the abandoned property. Claim Briar Basin. Blue lines raced from beneath my boots. They crossed fields, climbed ridges, entered reservoirs, followed the rail spur, and passed through the quarry. The entire basin vibrated once. Birds lifted from the western trees. Domain established. Primary objective: water, renewable power, secure shelter, sanitation. I connected both generators and the charged battery container to the temporary domain grid. Green indicators appeared across the power panel. Only then did I begin. The system marked 3 well locations. The shallowest offered weak long-term flow. Another lay too close to future livestock fields. The third sat beneath the eastern ridge. It was deeper but stable rock surrounded a high-output aquifer. The position also stood far enough uphill for gravity-fed emergency distribution. I selected it. Well casing pump components, filtration media cable, and concrete waited inside the marked zone. System fabrication load 6 tumbly 20 kg. Projected outputted 41,000 liters per day. I approved. A circular grid formed across the soil. Stone rose from the center in controlled segments as the bore descended. The excavated material collected inside a containment trench instead of vanishing. Casing sections lifted from their racks and joined above the opening. Each length descended into the bore. Filter gravel followed. Cable fed downward. A concrete collar formed around the shaft. The pump assembly locked into place. Both generators thundered beside the staging area while the battery container absorbed sudden changes in load. 46 minutes later, water surged through the discharge pipe. It struck the temporary tank hard enough to shake the metal. The build had burned almost 200 liters of diesel. I logged the number before inspecting the water. The sample looked clean. Appearance meant nothing. The system identified mineral content and biological risk before recommending a filtration sequence. I connected the temporary treatment unit and sealed a second sample for an independent laboratory. The system marked the treated output potable. Only then did I drink. Cold water crossed my tongue. The fortress had gained its first resource from beneath its own ground. Foundation requirement: complete potable water. I used the remaining 1,880 kilograms of fabrication capacity on a sealed sanitation unit beside the future command site. The compact structure contained a toilet waste tank wash point and protected connection for later expansion. At midnight, my daily quota reset. The second construction day belonged to renewable power. The first solar field did not need to run a city. It needed to operate the well lights, tools, ventilation, communications, and early construction systems without constant generator use. I selected 52 kilowatts of panels and a 240 kilowatt-hour battery bank. The system counted every frame, panel, cable, inverter, battery module, and control cabinet. System fabrication load 7480 kg. I used the loader to position mounting posts and cable drums across the marked ridge section. The battery modules entered a prefabricated fire-resistant enclosure beside the control cabinet. When every material reached the zone, I approved construction. Both generators powered the first stage while mounting posts drove into the eastern ridge. Steel frames locked into position. Panels settled across them in angled rows. Cable entered the protected battery room. When morning sunlight reached the first row, power flowed into storage. Foundation requirement: complete renewable power. 520 kilograms of capacity remained. I spent it repairing a collapsed drainage junction beside the administration building. The finished section looked minor beside the solar field. It still removed one future flood route. At the next midnight reset, I selected a secure command shelter above the quarry throat. 2 connected rooms appeared against the slope. One held controls and communications. The other provided a bunk water sanitation access and filtered ventilation. System fabrication load 7860 kg. Bulk stone and precast mass 39,000 kg. The system did not move those 39 tons for me. I spent 6 hours feeding quarry stone into marked hoppers and positioning precast sections with a crawler crane. A mixer unit pumped grout into a sealed supply line. When the bulk materials were ready, I activated the build. Both generators thundered beneath the slope as steel reinforcement rose from the staging racks. The crane-fed blocks shifted into their final positions. Quarry stone and concrete sealed around them in layered walls. Ducting pipes and cable disappeared inside protected channels. A hardened door seeded into the entrance. The completed shelter stood low against the slope, hidden from the public road. I inspected every room. Water flowed. Lights worked. Ventilation moved clean air through sealed filters. The door locked behind me. Domain foundation established. 2,000 kg daily capacity activates at next midnight reset. Homestead blueprints opened across the interface. Residences, greenhouses, barns, grain storage, workshops, a clinic shell, perimeter walls, and integrated gates became available. The land still looked mostly empty. Water power sanitation and a secure center already functioned beneath that emptiness. I spent the remaining daylight testing shutoff valves, recording maintenance intervals, and marking vehicle routes around the well. A poorly placed truck could crush a water line faster than any horde. That evening, I reviewed the gate design from the shelter. I slept for 4 hours before the next reset. At midnight, the new capacity activated. Daily construction capacity 2,000 kg. I drove to the quarry throat before sunrise. Stone walls narrowed the northern road to 18 meters. A gate there could protect the future command district without requiring kilometers of perimeter wall. Steel hydraulic equipment, precast tower sections, and control components waited nearby. System fabrication load 17,640 kg. Bulk stone and precast mass 68,000 kg. Staging took most of the morning. I used the crawler crane to place tower sections inside the feed zones. The loader filled both stone hoppers. 2 grout lines connected the temporary mixing unit to the future foundations. Only after every ton was positioned did I approve the blueprint. Both diesel generators rose to full load. Their combined roar rolled through the quarry. Reinforcement rods entered drilled channels inside both rock walls. Precast tower sections shifted into exact alignment around the anchors. Stone and grout sealed every joint. Thick steel plates assembled across the road. Internal braces locked behind the gate face. Hydraulic cylinders seated inside protected housings. A personnel door formed inside the eastern tower. Control panels appeared on both sides. The gate rose once. It lowered, stopped halfway, reversed, and completed an emergency manual release test. Primary authority Silas Venn. ADD secondary authority? The tunnel returned in perfect detail. Livia held my command key while steel sealed me outside. I dismissed the request. Future specialists would receive permissions tied to their work. Every command would be recorded. No relationship would override a safety limit. The gate lowered across the quarry road. Steel met concrete with a deep final impact. The first well sanitation unit solar integration command, shelter, and gate had consumed just over 900 liters of diesel. I entered the loss into my fuel plan before allowing myself to study the result. Behind the gate stood water, renewable power sanitation, and a secure shelter. Ahead waited almost 5,000 acres. The system opened my next objective, Homestead Tier, 5 voluntary permanent residents, food production, 30-day reserve, secure housing, basic medical capacity. Another line appeared beneath it, voluntary permanent residence 1-5. I counted as the first. 4 more people had to choose Briar Basin as home. The first person I called was Conrad Sayer, a 68-year-old structural engineer whose honesty had already cost him 3 jobs. In the first timeline, he died holding a shelter beam, while 12 strangers escaped beneath it. I found his number inside my father's archived contacts. The call rang 4 times. A rough voice answered. "Who is this?" "Silas Venn." A pause followed. "Arthur's son?" "Yes." "What do you want?" "I purchased Briar Basin." Another pause. "My condolences. I'm building an off-grid city there. That property eats money and floods in places the maps don't show. That is why I called. Send me your plans. I want you to inspect the site. I'm retired. You were forced out. That is a rude distinction. It is also accurate." Paper moved on his side of the call. "What have you built?" "A deep well, renewable power sanitation, a command shelter, and an integrated gate." "In 1 week? Come see it." "You expect me to drive 3 hours because a 22-year-old claims he raised a gate? I'll pay triple your former consulting rate for 1 inspection." "If this is a waste of time, I bill for the drive." "Agreed." He arrived late that afternoon in an old utility vehicle. Conrad stepped out with a steel cane, a weathered field case, and the expression of a man prepared to dislike everything he saw. His silver hair moved in the quarry wind. He ignored my offered hand and looked directly at the gate. "Where was this fabricated?" "Here." "Who poured the towers?" "An experimental construction system assembled them from the materials beside you." He turned toward me. "What kind of system?" "Inspect the result first." Conrad struck the concrete joints with a testing hammer. He checked the tower faces, anchor points, hydraulic housings, emergency release, and personnel door. His irritation faded as the inspection continued. He found no voids, misaligned steel, fractured grout, or leaking seals. After 20 minutes, he stepped back. This should have taken months. The final assembly took 91 minutes. His eyes moved toward the crane hopper's generators and empty precast racks. At least you understand materials still have to reach the site. I understand that walls do not unload themselves. Conrad opened his field case and removed a folded topographic map. Show me the full plan. I led him into the command shelter. The system exported a simplified development layout to the wall display. Conrad studied the quarry future residential ring agricultural fields and proposed inner walls. He took a red marker and drew a line from the western ridge toward the quarry throat. You put the inner retaining wall here? That was the proposed route. Then a cloudburst crosses the fire break, hits this wall, and turns your access road into a river. The existing drainage channel runs south during ordinary rain. He circled an abandoned cut hidden beneath decades of brush. 100-year storm fills this first. Your wall redirects everything toward the gate towers. I focused on the marked route. The system recalculated. Extreme runoff failure confirmed. The system had shown me what existed. Conrad understood what my construction would change. That distinction justified every dollar I had offered him. You expected the machine to replace an engineer? He asked. No. Good. Machines are excellent at building mistakes exactly as designed. I opened a clean map layer. Correct it. That requires a complete drainage survey. You have a month. I agreed to one inspection. I'm offering a 1-month trial. Conrad looked through the shelter window toward the gate. What are you actually preparing for? A biological disaster severe enough to break normal supply chains within 2 years. He turned slowly. You know that how? I have evidence I will not share during a first meeting. That is convenient. It is cautious. Conrad studied me instead of the map. You expect me to move here while keeping the reason secret? I expect you to inspect the site for 1 month. I summarized the terms: triple his former salary, private housing, full authority to halt any structure he could prove unsafe. No penalty if he left after the trial. Conrad tapped the red marker against the map. You would take structural orders from me? When the issue is structural and your reasoning survives review, that almost earned a smile. 1 month, he said. The system did not count him as a permanent resident. It should not have. He had agreed to work, not stay. Conrad walked outside and drove a red survey stake into the old runoff channel. We begin here, he said. Build your wall first and your city drowns. I handed him the remaining stakes. Conrad drove the second red stake into the weeds 20 meters west of the first. He checked the slope through a hand level, moved 3 steps uphill, and planted another. Bring me an excavator, a survey transit, every underground drawing you inherited, and 60 years of rainfall records. The excavator can arrive before sunset. Good. The water will not wait until morning. I called Venn Civil and ordered a crawler excavator, compact loader survey trailer, and 2 operators to Briar Basin. Conrad studied the translucent development plan hovering across my vision. You gave this system access to the entire property? It can survey anything inside my domain. Existing conditions? Yes. Can it predict what happens after you place walls across natural runoff? If it receives the correct variables. Conrad tapped the first stake with his cane. Then we find those variables before it builds a perfect disaster. The Citadel Architect could construct anything I designed within its limits. That did not make my first design correct. I opened permissions. Authorized display mirroring available? The system interface remained visible only to me unless I deliberately shared selected information through an approved tablet or domain terminal. I mirrored a specialist role screen onto Conrad's survey tablet. Create specialist role, structural consultant. I gave him access to topography, soil reports, drainage records, load calculations, and proposed structural plans. Construction activation remained locked to me. The command shelter gate controls company records and domain administration remained outside his authority. Conrad Sayer, structural consultant. Authority review, annotate or reject pending structural plans. Conrad read the permissions. No control over the main gate. Personnel access only. Keep it that way. I watched him place the tablet beneath one arm. You approve? If you gave unrestricted control to a man you met yesterday, I would leave now. That was the response I wanted from someone responsible for structures capable of burying people. Conrad followed the stakes into the overgrown channel. The depression looked harmless beneath waist-high brush. He opened a folding shovel and removed the upper layer of soil. Dark silt appeared beneath 20 centimeters of dry grass. He pushed the blade deeper. Water gathered inside the hole. "It rained 4 days ago," I said. The surface dried. The channel did not. He pointed toward the hidden moisture. "Build across this, and pressure gathers beneath whatever you place above it." The system highlighted the exposed flow. Subsurface runoff confirmed. A thin blue line curved north, crossed my planned access road, and disappeared beneath an abandoned maintenance embankment. Conrad followed it. There should be a culvert beneath that fill. The system had found no opening. We pulled vines from the embankment until cracked concrete appeared beneath fallen branches. Roots, stone, and compacted soil had blocked almost the entire culvert. Conrad drove a stake beside its buried mouth. The system missed this. It could not see through the obstruction. The water knew where it was. The excavator reached Briar Basin shortly before sunset. Its operator unloaded beside the old embankment while the compact loader cleared brush from the work zone. Both men were Venn civil employees assigned through the development contract. I gave them conventional instructions: expose the culvert, separate usable material, and keep every machine outside the quarry tunnels. Photography remained prohibited inside the restricted zone. Triple hazard pay discouraged unnecessary curiosity. The excavator peeled packed debris from the culvert entrance. Mud spilled from the opening. A dark stream followed. Within minutes, it became a waist-deep torrent crossing my proposed road. Conrad watched the water spread between his stakes. That is ordinary stored runoff. What happens during a severe storm? Your original gate plan loses its foundations. We spent the evening inside the command shelter reviewing old weather records. Briar Basin had suffered 4 major flood events during the previous 60 years. The abandoned research campus had recorded 3 drainage channels missing from modern surveys. One crossed beneath the western firebreak. Another descended into the lower quarry. The third ran directly toward the northern gate. A severe weather alert appeared on my phone before midnight. The storm would reach the northern ridges in 6 days. Projected rainfall exceeded anything recorded during the previous 3 years. Conrad enlarged the forecast. "We have enough time if the machines begin at dawn. What do you need?" He marked a diversion channel above the quarry, 2 retention basins, 3 reinforced culverts, and an emergency spillway. More than 40,000 tons of soil and stone had to move. The system could shape the culverts and control structures. Excavators and trucks still had to move the earth. The previous developer's agricultural rehabilitation and industrial reuse permits had transferred with the property. My legal team had already filed amendments for the well solar field housing and future agricultural facilities. Conrad's engineering license remained active. He sealed the emergency drainage drawings that evening and submitted them with the storm forecast. The county engineer issued provisional erosion control approval the following morning. By sunrise, 6 excavators and 14 dump trucks were moving across the western slope. The first machines cut the diversion channel. Others opened the retention basins and carried stone toward future building zones. We treated every excavated layer as a resource. Large rock went to retaining structures. Gravel moved beneath future roads. Clay lined the first basin. Topsoil went east toward the agricultural fields. At midnight, my fabrication quota reset. The first culvert required 6 tons of precision-shaped steel seals, bracing monitoring hardware, and gate components. Its shell used another 31 tons of bulk concrete. The loader fed aggregate into a mobile mixer. Concrete pumps pushed the mixture through illuminated supply lines. The system aligned the internal frame and sealed it inside the road foundation. 38 minutes later, the completed culvert passed beneath the new access route. Conrad entered it with a lamp. I followed. He measured the slope twice, then pointed toward a shallow lip near the western outlet. "Lower this edge by 2 millimeters." The system projected the expected flow. Estimated flow loss, 0.7%. Within tolerance, I said. Branches catch there. He swept the lamp across the lip. One branch catches grass. Grass catches mud. Your tolerance becomes a blockage during the first serious storm. I selected repair. The outlet surface shifted by 2 millimeters. Estimated flow loss, 0.1%. Conrad ran his fingers across the corrected edge. Use this profile for the other two. The system added his modification to the approved drainage blueprint. One technical correction improved every future culvert of the same class. The second foundation zone appeared stable on the surface scan. Conrad rejected it before the crane unloaded. Move it 18 meters south. The scan shows competent ground. The scan ends at 12 meters. The foundation reaches 8. The quarry company drilled deeper. He handed me a yellowed geological sheet from the property archive. An abandoned extraction void passed 14 meters beneath the marked site. I ordered a deep scan. A hollow chamber appeared below the proposed road. UNM'd subsurface void confirmed. Long-term collapse risk high. I canceled the blueprint. The crane operator watched us relocate the staged material. That cost us half a day, I said. Conrad folded the geological sheet. A road collapse would cost more. Delays irritated me. Rebuilding avoidable failures irritated me more. On the fourth morning, a black sport utility vehicle stopped beyond the northern gate. 2 men stepped onto the public shoulder. One photographed the gate towers. The other aimed a long-lens camera toward the solar field. The security feed sent both faces to my tablet. I recognized them. They worked for Kest Strategic Security. In the first timeline, the taller man had led the seizure of my eastern armory. I drove to the gate alone. Conrad remained on the western slope with the crews. The men watched me approach through the personnel lane. The taller one wore body armor beneath a company jacket. "Mr. Venn, you are photographing my property. We provide industrial risk assessments. I did not request one. Our review is complimentary." "No." His companion kept the camera raised. The taller man glanced toward the gate towers. "Remote projects attract unusual security problems. So do unidentified men documenting private infrastructure. We are standing on a public road. You may remain there." I displayed the surveyed property line and recorded no trespass notice on the gate terminal. "If either of you crosses that boundary, the cameras preserve the violation and forward it to council." The photographer lowered his lens slightly. "Damien said you had become paranoid. He wanted anger. I gave him information. Tell Damien his invoices remain frozen." The taller man stopped smiling. "He wants to resolve the misunderstanding. His attorney has my attorney's number. He would prefer to speak privately. I prefer documented conversations." They returned to the vehicle. I recorded their license plate, faces, equipment, arrival time, and direction of departure. The black vehicle remained on the ridge for another 7 minutes before driving south. Conrad waited beside the command shelter when I returned. "Business dispute, 1 known enemy and 1 employee willing to trespass for him. You expect more?" "Yes." He looked toward the public road. "Then every visible wall will make him more interested, which is why the important systems remain hidden." Conrad unrolled the drainage plan across the hood of my truck. "Finish this before worrying about men with cameras." By the 6th afternoon, the diversion channel stretched more than a kilometer across the western slope. All 3 reinforced culverts had passed flow tests. Both retention basins held controlled test fills. The emergency spillway stood clear above the quarry throat. The drainage campaign had consumed just over 18,000 liters of diesel. 2 tanker deliveries kept the excavators and trucks operating. The fuel cost exceeded every system build I had completed combined. Speed remained useful because I counted its price. The storm reached Briar Basin after midnight. Rain hammered the command shelter roof loudly enough to drown out the generators. Water descended from the western ridge in silver sheets. The diversion channel caught the first surge. Flow entered the upper retention basin. The water crossed its first marker. 12 minutes later, the second basin began filling. Conrad stood beside the monitor wall. "Western culvert." A camera showed branches turning inside the current. One struck the inlet grate. 3 more followed. Fence wire wrapped around the debris. Water climbed behind the blockage. I checked the basin projection. We have 17 minutes before overflow. The bypass is already open, Conrad said. The wire is binding the grate. I pulled on waterproof gear and carried a recovery harness into the crawler excavator. Conrad climbed into the cab beside me with the drainage plan. I took the controls. The western channel had become a river. A dead tree pressed against the inlet grate, while branches and fencing twisted around its roots. Do not pull the trunk toward us, Conrad said. The wire will wrap around the boom. I rotated the excavator 30 degrees east. The bucket teeth entered the brown water. Hook below the first fork, Conrad ordered. I felt the bucket strike wood. The trunk shifted half a meter. Fence wire rose from the current. Pin it against the bank. I lowered the bucket and trapped the wire against packed soil. The bucket also formed a barrier between the strongest current and the culvert edge. I engaged the parking brake and locked the boom hydraulics. Conrad kept one hand beside the emergency stop while I fastened the recovery harness. The tether clipped to the excavator's rear anchor. I climbed down carrying hydraulic shears. Water struck above my knees. Conrad's voice came through my radio. Cut the upper strand first. The lower strand carries the tension. I severed the first section. The wire snapped against the locked bucket. I moved lower. A branch struck my shoulder and spun away. The tether held me upright. Lower strand, Conrad said. Cut beside the twist. I placed the shears where he directed. The final strand parted. I returned to the cab, released the hydraulic lock, and raised the bucket. The dead tree dragged sideways. Water punched through the cleared grate. The upper basin stopped rising. The second basin remained below its emergency marker. The spillway stayed dry. Conrad watched the flow monitor settle. The outlet profile held. Your 2 millimeters mattered. They usually do. The storm continued until dawn. One embankment lost 3 meters of topsoil. A secondary ditch overflowed into an empty field. The 3 culverts remained open. Both basins held. The quarry throat never flooded. Conrad stood beside the first red stake after the rain weakened. The wet line passed less than a meter below it. Your original retaining wall would have directed that water toward the gate towers. I removed the failed wall from the development plan. Conrad's drainage spine replaced it across every future expansion stage. We keep your version. You sound unhappy. Changing the plan cost 6 days. He looked toward the full retention basin. Funerals cost longer. The storm had also filled the lower irrigation pond. A defensive project now stored water for future fields. The next weakness waited inside Conrad's temporary cabin. Rain had entered through both western windows. His blankets hung over 2 chairs beneath a portable heater. Briar Basin needed proper housing before any specialist would choose it as home. I opened the residential blueprints. The best early option was a reinforced lodge with 6 private bedrooms, a shared kitchen, 2 washrooms, a common room, and an underground storm shelter. Conrad rejected the first site. It stood above the buried runoff channel. He approved a rise west of the research campus. The lodge took 4 daily fabrication resets. Conventional crews prepared the foundation and installed the sewer connection. After they left each evening, the system assembled the frame, sealed the wall panels, and integrated the shelter below. Conrad inspected every stage. He changed the stair rise, widened the roof drains, and rerouted the kitchen exhaust away from future bedrooms. The system verified each correction. On the 4th evening, 6 lit windows glowed above the wet fields. Conrad entered the room reserved for him. A bed desk, wardrobe, and private wash basin waited beneath a broad window. This is more than a consultant requires. It is standard housing for a department head. I have not accepted the department. The room remains available during your trial. He placed his field case on the desk. Nothing entered the wardrobe. The resident count remained 1. The system described 638 acres as initially arable. That did not mean the soil could feed anyone. The old research records named two people who understood the land better than any surviving report. Dorian and May Pike had managed Briar Basin's soil program and seed archive before the campus closed. In the first timeline, Dorian's crop rotations saved our third harvest. May's storage notes prevented mold from destroying the remaining seed. I called the number attached to their current nursery. A man answered over the sound of greenhouse fans. Pike Heritage Seed. I need Dorian Pike. You found him. My name is Silas Venn. I purchased Briar Basin. The fans continued humming. I wondered who finally bought that place. I need you and May to inspect it. We inspected it for 11 years. Then you know what the property listing left out. Dorian laughed. Most of the useful parts. He and May arrived the next morning in a faded farm truck. Dorian was 53, lean from fieldwork, with a white-flecked beard and sun-darkened hands. May was 51, with short black hair streaked silver. She had both soil cases open before I finished greeting them. They ignored the gate. Dorian walked toward the eastern fields. May headed for the storage buildings. I followed Dorian while Conrad joined May. Dorian drove a soil auger into the first plot. He emptied the core across a white tray. The upper layer was pale and compacted. Can it produce this year? I asked. Something always grows. He broke the soil between his fingers. The question is whether you want crops or weeds. He showed me the compacted layer beneath 30 centimeters. Low organic matter. Poor nitrogen. Some sections recover in 1 season. Others need 3. I need useful production before winter. Use the southern plots for potatoes and beans. Put vegetables under cover. Plant green manure everywhere else. He pointed toward the separated topsoil piles from the drainage work. Keeping that surface layer saved you a year. Conrad ordered it. Dorian glanced toward the storage district. Do not tell him I approved. Conrad's voice came through my radio. I heard you. Dorian raised the radio. Then I saved time. May opened the largest storage building. Dust covered the floor. Old grain bins lined one wall. Rodent holes marked 3 corners. She touched a damp patch beneath the roof. Leaks. Repairable. Repair the roof first. She opened one bin and exposed rust beneath the lower seam. Raise the storage floor. Seal the walls. Separate seed from food and food from chemicals. What capacity do you recommend? More than your first estimate. She closed the bin and moved toward the refrigeration room. I want dry, cold, and frozen storage. One fire or pest problem cannot reach everything. Her answers stayed short because she was already inspecting the next failure. I showed the Pikes the Well Solar Field Drainage System Lodge and future agricultural district. I described the Citadel Architect as experimental construction technology owned by my holding company. That explanation would not survive expert scrutiny forever. I needed to learn what they would do with the truth before giving it to them. Dorian studied the greenhouse blueprint. This irrigation line gives every bed the same flow. That was the system design. The western half runs hotter in the afternoon. He redrew the network into 3 pressure zones. May added a separate wash entrance between the fields and processing room. The system confirmed both modifications. I offered them a paid 1-month trial. Dorian would control soil recovery, crops, irrigation, and seed selection. May would control storage, preservation, reserve standards, and kitchens. Either could stop an unsafe plan within their department by documenting the risk. Dorian looked toward the broken greenhouse frames. We promised ourselves we would never come back. May closed her soil case. We promised not to work for another board that ignored us. She faced me. When your expert says a plan is unsafe, what happens? I pointed toward the drainage channel that had replaced my wall. I change it. Conrad tapped his cane against the concrete once. The proof surrounded us. The Pikes accepted the trial. They continued renting a motel room near the southern highway and drove to Briar Basin each morning. I did not ask them to commit before they were ready. Over the next 4 days, a 1,200 square meter greenhouse rose beside the research campus. Conventional crews repaired the slab and delivered framing glass irrigation pipe fans and thermal screens. The system assembled the structure across 3 nightly fabrication cycles. Dorian supervised the first pressure test. Water reached the final bed at the rate he had specified. May opened the connected processing room. A boot wash drain separated it from the field entrance. Stainless counters lined one wall. A sealed cold room occupied the other. "You followed the plan," she said. "That was the purpose of hiring you. Most employers hire experts to decorate decisions already made. I already know what that costs." The Pikes brought established seedlings from their nursery: tomatoes, lettuce, herbs, peppers, onions, and hardy greens filled the first beds. The greenhouse would provide vegetables, seedlings, seed stock, and controlled growing space. Staple calories still had to come from open fields, stored grain, and future livestock. May directed the first reserve deliveries. Pallets of rice beans, oats, flour, salt, oil, dried milk, canned vegetables, and preserved meat entered the repaired warehouse. The initial stock exceeded 4 tons. She divided it between 2 fire-separated rooms. A locked seed archive occupied a third compartment. The reserve already exceeded the requirement for 5 residents. I intended it to support far more. The next specialist required a trip back into the city. Talia Mercer was 27, a veterinary technician and animal behavior specialist who managed Eastline Animal Rescue. In the first timeline, dogs she trained had found 27 people beneath collapsed buildings. I learned her name only after her settlement fell during the first winter. I also remembered an older news report. An Eastline transport van had overturned and burned on the elevated Eastern Loop. 5 dogs and 8 cats died before firefighters reached it. The report had included the date but not the exact intersection. That date was tomorrow. I called Eastline. A volunteer answered over a wall of barking. "Talia is collecting animals from our secondary building. She should be back after 3. "Which route does she use?" "I do not know. Usually the Eastern Loop." The old report had been accurate so far. I scheduled a meeting and prepared a Venn civil recovery truck. The vehicle carried a front winch, hydraulic spreader, foam, line-dry chemical extinguishers, medical supplies, traffic barriers, and enough equipment to open a damaged vehicle without entering it blindly. Rain covered the city the following afternoon. I reached the Eastern Loop before 3 and drove its elevated section twice. Nothing happened. On the third pass, traffic slowed near a broad interchange. A delivery truck entered the wet curve too quickly. Its rear wheels lost traction. The truck jackknifed across 2 lanes. A white animal rescue van struck its side and rolled against the median. Crates slammed against the rear windows. I braked before the delivery truck stopped moving. The recovery truck blocked the nearest lane. I deployed warning barriers called emergency services and carried the medical bag toward the overturned van. Fuel ran beneath its crushed front section. The damaged battery housing sparked against the road. A woman hung from the driver's seatbelt. Dark auburn hair had fallen from a loose braid. Blood crossed one eyebrow. She remained conscious. "Do not move your neck," I said. "Animals in the back. I see them. One dog is loose." The van shifted against the median. I anchored the recovery truck's winch to its rear frame and tightened the cable. The body stopped rocking. I cut power at the exposed battery lead with insulated hydraulic cutters. The sparks ended. Smoke still rose from the crushed engine compartment. I emptied a dry chemical extinguisher through the broken grill before approaching the driver again. "Can you feel both legs?" "Yes." "Neck or back pain?" "No." "My ankle is trapped." I placed the hydraulic spreader against the crushed footwell. Metal bent away from her boot. I supported her shoulders while she released the seat belt. She slid through the broken upper windshield and landed beside the median. The paramedics had not arrived yet. She tested the injured ankle and turned toward the rear doors. "Talia Mercer?" Her gray-green eyes narrowed. "How do you know my name?" "We had a meeting scheduled." A dog barked inside the van. Smoke thickened again. Talia stood despite the limp. There are 5 dogs and 8 cats. Tell me which animal will bite when I open the rear. The sable shepherd is loose. Her name is Mika. Will she attack? She is frightened. Keep me where she can see me. The rear doors had twisted beneath the van's weight. I inserted the hydraulic spreader between them. One hinge tore free. A cat screamed inside its carrier. Talia crouched beyond the opening. Micah, down. A sable shepherd stood across 2 overturned crates, its lips pulled back. Talia kept her voice low. Down, girl. The dog lowered itself. I widened the opening. Talia reached inside and clipped a leash to Micah's collar. The shepherd crawled out and pressed against her uninjured leg. I removed 3 cat carriers. 2 smaller dogs followed on slip leads. The foam line hissed as I knocked down a flare beneath the front seats. We cleared the remaining 2 dogs and 4 more cat carriers before smoke filled the rear compartment. Talia counted the carriers. 7 cats. You said 8. The gray carrier was beneath the lower rack. The rack had collapsed behind 2 metal shelves. Scratching came from underneath it. I fed a hooked recovery cable through the rear opening. The hook locked around the bent shelf frame. Talia directed the foam line toward the hot floor, while I operated the winch remotely. The rack shifted toward the doors. Metal scraped across the van interior. A gray carrier appeared beneath it. The plastic handle had broken. I reached through the opening, caught the lower frame, and pulled it outside. Fuel ignited beneath the front axle as we dragged the carrier behind the recovery truck. Fire spread through the van seconds later. Talia counted every animal twice. 5 dogs, 8 cats, all alive. Only then did she allow the arriving paramedics to examine her. The cut above her eyebrow required adhesive strips. Her ankle was badly bruised but not broken. They cleared her neck and spine before deciding hospital transport was unnecessary. I loaded the animals into the recovery truck's secured equipment compartment. Talia stood beneath the open side door, with Micah beside her. You came to offer me work? Yes. And happened to be carrying enough equipment to dismantle a van? I own a recovery company. She glanced toward the burning wreck. You were also early. I prefer arriving before meetings. She continued studying me. I had no reason to explain the dead animals I remembered from another life. I rescued you because you were trapped, I said. The job offer existed before the crash. Good. That response was firmer than gratitude. I do not sign contracts because someone saved me. I would reject you if you did. Talia climbed into the passenger seat with Micah at her feet. We returned the animals to Eastline Rescue. The shelter occupied an old transit building between a warehouse and a tire shop. Dogs barked behind temporary partitions. Cats filled 2 converted offices. The rear roof leaked into plastic buckets. Talia changed into a clean navy shelter jacket and showed me the facility while favoring her injured ankle. 34 dogs and 51 cats remained under Eastline's care. Most had foster placements or pending adoptions. 20 had nowhere confirmed to go. The property owner planned to demolish the building in 6 weeks. Talia had rejected offers from a security breeder and 2 overcrowded warehouses. You need land, I said. I need a safe facility. I have both. You have an abandoned quarry with a large gate. I also have water power housing fields and construction capacity. She folded her arms. What are you building? An off-grid agricultural settlement designed to remain functional through a national biological emergency. Her expression hardened. How serious? Serious enough that livestock working dogs, veterinary quarantine, and protected food stores will matter. And the cats? Rodent control around grain. Companionship inside residential areas. They are not equipment. Neither are the dogs. She watched me closely. I need someone who can decide which animals are safe, which can work, which require isolation, and which cannot live around children or livestock. Her personnel file included veterinary credentials, animal behavior certification, and a current wilderness first responder qualification. She possessed the skills. I still needed to judge how she used them. No overcrowding, she said. Agreed. No breeding without health and temperament standards. Agreed. And no promises that every dangerous animal can be rehabilitated. I had expected compassion. Her answer showed that she understood responsibility. You control behavioral assessment and animal health, I said. Final authority? Inside your department unless the decision places human life or the settlement at immediate risk. She considered the terms. I inspect the site first. I expected you to. 2 days later, Talia entered Briar Basin in a borrowed utility van. Micah occupied the passenger seat. Talia wore cargo trousers, work boots, and the Navy shelter jacket. The cut above her eyebrow had begun closing. She examined the gate before greeting me. Can an animal tag trigger the personnel sensors? Not yet. I want an alert if a working dog crosses a restricted boundary. The tag should never open the gate by itself. I added the requirement to the access plan. Talia inspected the future animal district. The system's first barn blueprint placed quarantine beside feed storage. She rejected it immediately. The walls are separate, but the air intake is shared. She traced the ventilation route. A coughing dog enters isolation. A worker carries droplets from the feed room into the lodge. The system recalculated. Contamination transfer risk confirmed. The blueprint changed. Separate air intake. Separate exhaust. A decontamination entrance. A physical divide between quarantine-healthy animals and feed storage. Talia reviewed the revision. That happened quickly. The system works after the correct problem is identified. Conrad approached with his cane. He requires several people to identify the correct problem. Talia looked between us. That is more reassuring than one man claiming he has none. She spent the rest of the day testing water access fencing plans, terrain storage routes, and future pasture locations. Micah inspected every doorway. The shepherd stopped twice near the old warehouse and stared into the brush. Talia found fresh fox tracks there. The dog had detected them before either of us. At sunset, Talia sat on the command shelter steps while Micah drank from a steel bowl. I can relocate 8 dogs and 12 cats immediately, she said. The rest, adoptions and foster placements, already exist. I will not cancel them to make your facility look important. Good. I need 2 isolation rooms, 4 outdoor runs, a separate cat room, feed storage, medical storage, and proper wash equipment. You can redesign the southern warehouse. I offered her a salary above her current pay, private housing, and departmental authority. She negotiated relocation costs and 2 weeks of continued pay for the shelter assistants helping with the move. The construction period would remain paid preparation. Her 1-week residential trial would begin only after the animals entered the completed facility. If she rejected Briar Basin, the animals under her care would leave with her. The southern warehouse changed over the next 5 days. Conventional crews removed damaged walls, sealed the floor, and repaired the roof. The system installed separate ventilation, washable surfaces, drainage, secure runs, feed lockers, and a treatment room. Talia replaced clear kennel dividers with solid lower panels to reduce reactivity. She changed the latches so dogs could not lift them with their noses. The cat room went above a warm utility line and away from the barking runs. Every verified correction entered the permanent animal facility blueprint. While Talia rebuilt the warehouse, the Pikes rebuilt the fields. Dorian spread compost across the southern plots. Cover crop seed entered the compacted sections. Potato beds formed along the better drained slope. May filled the cold room and personally tested every temperature alarm. New leaves appeared inside the greenhouse. Dorian and May made their decision on the 17th day. Their farm truck entered Briar Basin, pulling a small trailer. Boxes filled the bed. A rolled mattress rested beneath a tarp. May carried a framed photograph into the lodge. Dorian brought 12 sealed seed cases. "Your trial is not finished," I said. "Our nursery lease expires next year," May replied. Dorian placed the first seed case beside the greenhouse door. "We would rather move the collection once." Permanent? May set the photograph on the common room shelf. This was our best work before the funding ended. Dorian looked through the lodge window toward the restored greenhouse. "We are staying." The system responded privately. Voluntary permanent residents 3-5. They chose one bedroom together and converted a spare room into a climate-controlled seed office. May reorganized the shared kitchen before unpacking her clothes. Dorian installed a boot rack outside the greenhouse and threatened to leave muddy shoes in the irrigation pond. Neither requested special access. Both asked for permissions limited to their departments. I granted them exactly that. After 7 stable growing days, the system recognized active food production. Functioning food production verified. The reserve warehouse crossed its required threshold the following morning. 30-day food reserve verified. Talia's animal convoy entered Briar Basin on the 22nd day. 2 animal vans followed a feed truck through the inspection lane. Micah rode beside Talia in the lead vehicle. Every animal passed through external screening. Talia checked records, temperatures, behavior, and quarantine assignments. The system controlled doors and environmental alarms. It received no medical information beyond what she authorized. The 8 dogs entered the new runs one at a time. 3 immediately inspected the fences. 2 hid inside covered kennels. Micah walked the full perimeter before lying beside the treatment room door. The 12 cats entered the upper room in carriers. 1 climbed onto the highest shelf within minutes. Another disappeared into a padded tunnel. A large orange cat sat in the center of the room and stared at me as though evaluating my application. Talia opened its carrier. "He distrusts men." "Reasonable." Her mouth moved slightly before she turned away. The shelter assistants remained for 2 days. They returned to the city once every animal had settled. Talia stayed and began her residential trial. Briar Basin still lacked basic human medical capacity. I did not build a stocked room and call myself a doctor. Venn Civil already contracted an occupational health nurse for remote industrial sites. I hired her to inspect Briar Basin stock a stabilization room visit twice each week and remain available through a 24-hour medical service. The reinforced medical bay stood beside the lodge. It contained 2 treatment beds, an AED oxygen splints, wound care supplies, sterilization equipment, and a refrigerated cabinet under the nurse's control. I had earned advanced workplace first aid certification before regression. 5 years of battlefield triage had made those old qualifications considerably more useful. Talia's wilderness first responder qualification created a second on-site responder. Neither of us performed surgery or pretended to replace a physician. The occupational health nurse tested the oxygen seals, checked every expiration date, and approved the emergency protocols. On-site stabilization capacity verified. Secure rooms now existed for every permanent resident. Secure housing verified. On the 7th evening after the animal convoy arrived, I found Talia attaching a domain tag to Micah's collar. The tag triggered security alerts without granting the dog control over any door. Talia tested 2 restricted boundaries. Both warnings reached my tablet. "You built what I requested," she said. "You identified functions the settlement needed. You also delayed 4 dogs. 2 require single animal housing we have not completed. 2 remain inside ownership disputes." She tightened Micah's collar. "You read every case. I said capacity and quarantine would matter." Talia looked across the lit runs. The dogs had stopped barking. Cats moved behind screened windows above them. I changed my registered address this morning. The system appeared privately. Voluntary permanent residents 4-5. I mirrored the counter onto the treatment room tablet. Talia read it. "You needed another resident. I needed a competent animal director. And the number? I would have offered you the same authority without it." She nodded once. "Keep answering that way." Only 1 homestead requirement remained. 5 voluntary residents. Conrad continued sleeping in the room reserved for him. His wardrobe remained empty. His city house still existed. He referred to Briar Basin as my development rather than our settlement. I never asked him to change the wording. His 1-month trial ended beside the upper retention basin. Autumn sunlight reflected across water, held behind the new embankment. The controlled release fed the irrigation pond below the eastern fields. Conrad measured the spillway one final time. It passes. That sounds dangerously close to approval. It means I found nothing worth rebuilding today. He folded the measuring rod. My house sale closed yesterday. I looked toward him. You listed it 3 weeks ago. A Venn civil box truck appeared on the northern road. It stopped at the gate. The rear doors opened. Conrad's drafting table stood strapped between 2 bookcases. His workbench rested behind it. 6 wooden crates filled the remaining space. "My room is still available?" he asked. It was never reassigned. He handed me a folded address change confirmation. "I will need proper workshop lighting. You will have it." The system updated. Voluntary permanent residence 5-5. I had authorized settlement milestones to mirror on communal domain terminals. The same message appeared on the gatehouse display. Conrad glanced toward it. "Do I receive anything ceremonial?" "You receive responsibility for every structure capable of falling on us," so nothing changed. The remaining conditions completed in sequence. Food production verified, 30-day reserve verified, secure housing verified, basic medical capacity verified, homestead tier established. A low vibration crossed Briar Basin. The greenhouse lights brightened. The well control panel restarted. Emergency routes appeared inside every occupied building. The gate towers displayed an updated domain seal. Daily fabrication capacity will increase to 6,000 kg at next reset. New blueprints opened across the interface. A Grade 2 perimeter, a permanent clinic shell, an expanded animal quarantine complex, an agricultural utility grid, deep cold storage, a residential court, a machine workshop. 30 days after Conrad planted the first survey stake, Briar Basin held 5 permanent residents. 20 animals occupied its protected facilities. Crops grew beneath glass. Water moved through tested channels. Food, fuel, medical supplies, and construction equipment now had assigned storage instead of temporary piles. Briar Basin had become a functioning settlement. Micah growled beside the northern gate. The shepherd stood with her ears angled toward the ridge. Talia stepped from the animal building. What does she hear? A faint mechanical buzz crossed the afternoon air. A black drone rose above the trees beyond the property line. It turned its camera toward the gate. I opened the northern security feed. An unmarked black vehicle waited on the public road. A man beside its open rear door wore the silver crest of Kest Strategic Security. Damien had escalated from roadside photographs to aerial surveillance. The drone completed one slow circle. It crossed the legal boundary on its second pass. The system marked the intrusion but took no action without an authorized defensive system. I could have shot it. Doing so before the outbreak would create legal trouble and reveal the range of my weapons. I let it photograph the visible gate, greenhouse roofs, drainage equipment, and ordinary construction machines. The command shelter remained hidden beneath the quarry slope. The deeper utility routes stayed underground. Damien would see enough to become more interested. He would not see the systems that made Briar Basin difficult to kill. Conrad joined me at the gate. Talia stood on my other side with Micah. Dorian and May watched from the greenhouse road. 5 residents and an unfinished perimeter gave Damien little reason to fear us yet. The homestead interface remained open. 6,000 kg daily capacity activates at midnight. Grade 2 perimeter available. I opened the perimeter blueprint. A reinforced line formed across the northern ridge and curved toward the western firebreak. Conrad lifted the remaining red survey stakes. Drainage first. The main channels are ready, I said. Mark the foundation drains. He drove the first stake into the soil as the drone disappeared south. Whatever Damien thought he had mapped would begin changing at midnight. Conrad drove the second red stake into the soil before Damien's drone disappeared beyond the southern ridge. He checked the slope through his hand level and shifted the marker uphill. The foundation drain begins here. I mirrored the perimeter plan onto his survey tablet. The proposed barrier began at the quarry gate, crossed the northern ridge, followed the western fire break, and ended against the southern rock face. Natural cliffs already protected more than a kilometer of the inner district. The exposed approaches required 1,862 meters of artificial barrier. 3 designs appeared on my interface. The cheapest used anti-climb steel fencing with buried mesh. It could rise quickly, but a heavy vehicle could breach it. The second design used solid precast panels between reinforced towers. It offered greater protection, though future expansion would require dismantling entire sections. The third combined both approaches. Concrete and steel walls would protect the road's gates and western firebreak. Anti-climb fencing would cover the quarry rim where the natural drop already stopped vehicles. An interior patrol road foundation, drains, lighting, buried conduit, and passive sensors would connect the entire perimeter. I selected the hybrid design. Grade 2 perimeter. Secured core area 96 acres. Artificial barrier length 1,862 meters. Initial system fabrication load 716,400 kg. Bulk stone, concrete, and precast mass 9,480,000 kg. Conrad enlarged the western section. Your expansion joints are too far apart. The system used regional temperature data. This ridge freezes at night after taking direct afternoon heat.